Welcome everyone to a long-awaited and heavily requested entry into the Skill Issue Guide series. Today we're finally going to be taking a look at the MiG-23 Flogger. I'm assuming most of you are probably primarily interested in the Pack Premium ML variant, so most of the gameplay you'll see in the background will be with that aircraft. However, the strategies I talk about with this video will be relevant to all versions of the airframe. The MiG-23 is one of those aircraft which is not super dominant. I never got any games with more than 5 kills, to be honest, but it can at least get 2 to 3 kills per match very reliably, even when playing pretty brain dead, which makes it a very good vehicle for grinding. Also, while survivability isn't really a relevant factor for almost any jet aircraft, I have to say the MiG-23 is capable of surviving an absolutely ludicrous amount of punishment. I've survived direct missile hits multiple times in this thing, and even continued to fly with one or both wings blown off. Anyways, in War Thunder there are 3 main categories of MiG-23 in the game at the moment. You have the 11.7 BR late MiG-23s, the ML, MLD, and MLA, the 11.0 early versions, the M and the MF, and then the ground attack BN version. The MLD is the best of the bunch, being equipped with an improved RWR and redesigned wings with better maneuverability compared to the MLA and ML. The 11.0 variants, meanwhile, are basically worse in every way, with heavier airframes, worse radars, and perhaps worst of all, they don't get any R-24 missiles, but instead have to rely on the R-23. This is a severe issue because in addition to having about a third less thrust compared to the R-24, the R-23 also has a 1.7 second guidance delay after launch, which I don't think I need to explain to you why that's very problematic. Combined with the pretty awful radar found on these aircraft, I would not recommend even using them. Don't worry though, there's a far more effective and entertaining option to replace the R-23s with, which I'll explain a little bit later. Rounding it all out, we have the BN, which has no missiles, no radar, and no countermeasures, but it's at 9.7. Basically, just run it with gun pods and rockets, and hope for the best. Despite all these differences, I employ pretty much the same strategy with all of these variants, just with some minor tweaks depending on the BR. The first thing you should be aware of is that even more advanced versions of this aircraft have a pretty buggy and unreliable radar. Additionally, while the R-24 is a quite good missile overall, it has the quirk of having a very short burn time of only 3 seconds, which means it won't maintain its energy well over distance when tracking maneuvering targets. What it does have, though, is great acceleration because of how fast and hard it burns, so against targets at close range, this thing will basically be undodgeable. It's for these reasons that you're going to want to not rely on long-range BVR, but instead focus on blindsiding people at close range with your R-24s, which is going to be your primary means of getting kills in the later versions of this aircraft. Ideally, you want to be using these against targets within 8 kilometers of you, or if possible even less, who are moving at very high speed directly towards you. This will make it exceedingly difficult for them to have enough time to notch or dodge kinematically. Regarding your IR missiles, most people run R-60Ms. These are all-aspect 30G missiles, which you can carry up to 4 of, but have infamously terrible range and flare resistance. If you find that these work fine, then go ahead and use them, as I did in most of this footage, but I personally prefer the R-13M1. This is a 20G rear aspect only missile, however it has nearly twice the effective range of the R-60, and it has a sight FOV of only 2.5 degrees compared to the R-60M's 5 degrees. If you're not familiar with what that means, you know that little circle that pops up when you're warming up your missile? Well, that's not just some aesthetic thing. The smaller inner circle shows essentially what the missile can see. Due to the R-13 having so much smaller of an FOV, in layman's terms, this makes it drastically less flare-hungry than the R-60M. In fact, I find the R-13s to be so substantially more reliable than the R-60Ms that I honestly prefer to take them even at the cost of only able to bring out half as many. If you find the R-60 works fine for you, then again, disregard, but if you're like me and can't stand the damn things, this is an option that's on the table. And if you think that's a bit of a contrarian take, well, it's about to get even worse. Here's my advice for the 11.0 floggers, which can't use the R-24s. Instead of relying on guided missiles for head-on shots, I'm going to take a page out of my IAR-93 playbook and recommend the S-24 rockets. All you have to do to use these things is set your rocket activation distance to 800 meters, fire right when your opponent is 1.3 kilometers away, and this will set off an airburst explosion big enough that it should, at the very least, badly fuck up the enemy plane if they're caught anywhere near it. I would only recommend taking one of these though, because you do not get separate launches if you take 2 of them, even if you mount one on the wing and one on the fuselage, which yes, I did test. I'm pretty sure that's a bug though. Despite the difference in armament, your strategy for all variants of this aircraft will be mostly the same. due to the fact that all versions of this aircraft will very frequently encounter aircraft with significantly more reliable radars and long-range missiles. BVR isn't really going to be something that this is most optimally used for. Instead, my opening move is to fly supersonic clockwise around the bases at treetop level. This will allow you to earn a few easy kills by conducting essentially undodgeable surprise head-on attacks against enemy base bombers, as well as all of those dumb enough to charge straight into the bulk of your team. Also, I usually like to keep my radar off until I'm at least within visual range of the enemy to add an even greater level of surprise. Once you've expended your head-on weapons this way, you can start circling into the middle of the map to pick people off with your guns and IR missiles. Now, here's the part where I need to go into more detail about flight performance. The MiG-23 unfortunately had its flight performance nerfed pretty badly about a year ago, so its maneuverability and energy retention are not exactly stellar. What it does have, though, is a very high top speed. At higher altitudes, I've hit Mach 1.7 just casually flying around searching for targets, and on the deck, you can straight line rip on full afterburner. For this reason, you want to keep your speed up and employ hit-and-run tactics. If you miss a target, don't immediately turn around and bleed out all your speed, because this is not a jet you want to get slow in. Instead, have some discipline, keep your speed up, and either swing out wide before making another pass at the target, or alternatively just keep going and look for a different target. If you let yourself get slow, with the 11.7 variants especially, there are a ton of different airframes you'll encounter that will just absolutely tear you to shreds in a low-speed dogfight. Even Phantoms can give you a hard time if you let them get the drop on you. Some things you may be able to do to pull out a win in a low-speed dogfight if you're against an aircraft without a decent thrust-to-weight ratio is to just pitch up and try to stall them out so that you can employ a hammerhead maneuver and loop back down on top of them, or alternatively just employ a spiral climb. Due to its excellent thrust, the MiG-23 will have the advantage in the vertical when fighting against most other third-generation fighters. Do be aware, though, that most of such fights will end with one or both of you getting third-partied, but hey, it's better than just dying outright, I guess. One other thing I'd like to talk about before I wrap up is the guns. The GSH 23mm is a weapon that most Soviet mains will be very familiar with, but if you're not, you should know that this is a weapon with very low velocity compared to what you might be used to with American 20mm, so it will have a much shorter effective range. I personally like to turn on vertical targeting so that I don't have to pull as much lead at least, but this is of course optional. Also, I find the HE rounds can be a bit unreliable, so I actually like to take the default belts to get a good amount of API rounds mixed in there. As a general rule, for any cannon smaller than 30mm, I like to have some API or APHE mixed into my belts, ideally 50-50 with HE, since some of these aircraft around these BRs can be pretty tanky, and I like to have some assurance that if I get a solid hit into somebody, it's going to punch deep and take out an engine or something. Anyways guys, that's pretty much all there is to the MiG-23. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the playlist in the description for more similar content, and I'll see you guys in the next one.